feel like
This is
such
fresh
a
water,
stunt
no
for
problems drinking it.
tonight.
I'm turning this on now. It's not for amplification, it's just for recording.
No problem.
And trustee Estes, I started just.
I apologize for my casualness, but I did have ice cream. So if I have funny answers, I'm still on the anesthesia.
Thanks for being here.
That's good. I remember that one. Welcome this evening. Are you ready?
Sure, it is, yes, I can be.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm going to read you 5 questions.
Okay.
It'll be about 3 minutes for each of them.
Okay.
And if we have time, then there will also be an opportunity for the trustees to ask a question if they have one.
Sure.
Anthony, as our timekeeper, we'll know how much time we have. Raises
Here's
things.
some name.
Can
Can
you
you see yellow?
Yellow and
Yes,
red.
I'm
That's a
seeing
good
that.
question.
No, I can actually.
Okay, we're all set?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right, question number 1.
Okay.
The governance team is comprised of 5 individual board members and the superintendent, who reports directly to the board as a whole. In your view, what are the appropriate roles, duties, and authority of the board, of the members of the governance team, individually and collectively?
Okay, so as far as I understand it, and from knowing the board and my understanding is that the board's primary responsibility, aside from hiring, candidate and reviewing, is basically to set the high level goals and serve really as sort of the directorial body that manages what his responsibility. So Anthony, as well as his team, is over there, as well as the principals, they have the day-to-day operations and the actual specific tasks. So it's almost like looking at it at a macro level and a micro level, whereas Anthony and his team, all his administrators and his staff, are responsible for everything having to do with the rec department, the actual schools, setting curriculum, and as he delegates his responsibilities to his principals, they have responsibilities for the day-to-day activities in the schools themselves. The board is basically, as far as I can understand, responsible for setting the goals for the district, setting the targets to basically have the things for which Anthony and his organization are responsible for implementing. And then providing the oversight to ensure that whatever measures and metrics are needed to ensure that Anthony and his organization are meeting those goals, whether it's for teachers, for training, for students, for scores, for activities that go on in the district. There are different people, and you don't need to go into like the responsibilities of different people in his organization, or like how the board breaks up into different committees and some of their responsibilities for planning events, or I'm not sure what you're looking for.
The question is, in your view, what are the appropriate roles, duties, and authority of the members of the governance team,
Right,
individually and collectively?
Right, so I think it's really to set the goals for the district, to make sure they're both the district-specific goals that might be related to our town, as well as to ensure that we're meeting all the goals that the state and federal impose on the school district, to set standards by which Anthony can run his organization and make sure that those goals are implemented, and then to review very specifically to ensure that all those goals are being met, to update the goals, taking into account current responsibilities as well as projections of the future, both in terms of demographics for the town, in terms of implementation of technology, both in terms of how education standards are moving, and so on. So basically, to sum it up, the board sets the vision, and then Anthony's organization implements that vision.
Thank you. Number 2, how should an effective school board interact with parents and community members on important and controversial policy issues?
I think the key, particularly for things that are controversial by their very nature, you're never going to be able to make everyone happy, otherwise they wouldn't be controversial. So I think the key strategy has to do with openness and transparency. So I think as long as, for whatever the issue might be, issue X, let's just say, whatever is under discussion, I think it's important to publish as much information about it, to hold open meetings so that the people in the community can comment and provide input and feedback, because I think the board needs input and feedback from the community. There's many ways for the board to learn about issues, but one of those ways is definitely. And then as long as, and since all meetings generally are in public anyway, there are then just make whatever decision it needs to make. I mean, I think the key is as long as there's open transparency, the board is always going to do what it believes is in the best interest of the district, both short and long term. And so as long as the public can see that, you know, and so the open includes availability for comments, includes publishing meeting notes, includes distributing an even range of meetings on the calendar, you know, morning meetings for the, you know, evening meetings for those who work and so on. I think that's I think the key responsibility.
Thank you. Question 3. What would you like to accomplish as a board member? What is your highest priority and why? And what are you proud of in this district?
So I know the board has a lot of things that is, you know, as far as its agenda, but I think one item that's raised and has been raised over the course of the last few years and when I was running for election many years ago was one of my key issues, which I still think it is, and I'm not saying we're not doing this in the district at all, but I think is dealing with, because I think academically we have a good handle on how to do. There's a lot of good academic programs. We're doing a lot of good things in the classroom. We're learning constantly. There's new implementation of technology to help academics, and I think we're moving well on that. But I think the emotional support of our kids, you know, with the demographics changing in our community to be many more high-powered, very executive to income to high-powered executive families compared to what we in our district 20 or 30 years ago. There's a lot more pressure on our kids, I think, to be successful in different metrics of success. And I think we need to make sure we continue to have the support system and the programs in place as part of the academics in order to make sure that kids develop, persistence and resiliency without sacrificing, of course, any of the, actual academic support in terms of learning, writing, reading, and the standard type of material. So I think that's very key. And I think, pushing in the use of technology is both a scary way to help this and a way to be very careful, with all the social media. And I've seen, I have kids in Crocker as well as in West, and I've seen how social media has been used positively, I think, with some of those kids, and I've seen, unfortunately, how some of these social media has been very harmful and hurtful with kids. And I think teaching that as well as incorporating that, not in lieu of other programs, but as part of curriculum, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. And I think that's a very exciting way because it can help our teaching tremendously, but it's something we need to be very, very careful. And I know we're doing the forward initiatives, and it's not like we're not working on that, but I think that's a very interesting area that I think, when I was in high school, actually, when early 80s, I was actually the one student representative on a back in New Jersey, where I grew up, on what was called the Superintendent's Task Force on Computers in Education. So there were no computers in the school. And so I was actually very involved in helping develop the first computer program for a New Jersey public high school. And we implemented with old computers and so on. So that's always been sort of an interest of mine throughout my life.
Thank you. Number 4. Identify a recent board decision that you felt strongly about and describe how you would balance community concerns, student needs, the law, staff considerations, and your personal values to determine how to vote on the issue.
I think the one would probably, most of you probably was a year ago when we had to go through all those budget cuts and had to deal with all those financial budget concerns. Because I know that that was a very challenging one for everyone, from the ones who were involved and certainly for Anthony and staff. And I think the actual approach you guys took was really good in terms of not saying we're going to just cut one thing, but we're going to make it sort of an even distributed blend of some programs, some teachers, figuring out classroom size, and so on. And what I liked about the process was there were a lot of community meetings. There was a lot of what I talked about earlier, because I know those are controversial as to what decisions to make. Do we cover languages? Do we cut other programs? How do we adjust classroom size, even a few bodies? And that impacts education potentially. And so So I think that was a very interesting process. And I think the way it was handled was correct. It's basically, I've worked in technology companies. I've been on the board of public companies, and we do have budgetary decisions to make all the time. And it's very hard because there are always going to be people impacted, both the people who get paid, so that's the teachers, administration, and staff, as well as the people for whom the money is spent, whether it's development teams and support organizations and marketing teams or whatever it might be in a public company. And you really have to make the decisions based on what are your future, are you really damaging your future? What can we do as temporary cuts where we don't get the money as we move forward, that, to restore programs. And so I know that was, there was a lot of controversy there, but I was fairly comfortable with the way the board was, part of the board at the time went through that process. And I think that related to the first question you asked me about, the second question, about how to make those kind of decisions.
Thank you. This is a longer one.
Okay.
There's a premise and then there's a couple of questions on the make. So
Okay.
if you need me to repeat anything, just.
No,
Okay. The school district is committed to making a balanced reinvestment in multiple areas, including enhancing world language, increasing professional development, investing in technology, maintaining competitive compensation for our staff, and considering a request to help fund a turf field. Knowing that board members in the community have diverse priorities, A, what is your primary goal in the decision-making process? B, how will you approach the board discussion, knowing that board member and stakeholder opinions will differ on each of the issues? C, how will you? Yeah.
I don't mind my name is. I should have brought myself, but I have a pen, but. Okay. It's okay, so go back to A. Sorry, A is.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there are a bunch of competing potential visionary things.
Exactly.
Languages, turf fields, et cetera. Yes.
Okay. What is your primary goal in the decision-making process?
Okay.
B, how will you approach the board discussion, knowing that board member and stakeholder opinions will differ on each of the issues? C, how will you analyze and formulate your position if your child will be personally affected by the outcome?
Sure.
And D, how will you respond if you do not persuade a majority of the board to support your position, or if you are in the majority, but the vote is not unanimous?
So those are great questions, and I think actually this gets back to some of the prior experience I have being a member of board companies, because we have these kind of decisions to make all the time. You have fixed budget, how much do you push in marketing, how much do you spend development to work on new product lines, how much does sales get? So these are common questions where you have a number of competing stakeholders, and always being sort of, at least from the technology side, I was also, in your example, you have kids with particular interests, or I'm on the AYSO board, I have been for many years, so I have maybe opinions about the turf field, for example. I'm kind of mixed on that, but at least I have a slight bias. My kids are starting to age out, but I think it's useful. Anyway, but it's a very similar thing, because we're as part of the company board, I'm representing development team technology, the CTO, I think. So I have a slight bias, but I also know that making these kinds of decisions have to be done in the long-term interest of either the company or, in this case, of the district. So as an engineering person with engineering degrees and math degrees and so on, my background is very much to get all the data and look at it. So the analysis part, I think, actually would fall very much in my strengths. There are different, obviously there'll be different definitions and ways to measure ROI. Some of it is both financial in terms of money, some of it is potentially related to school scores to make sure we keep up our scores. Some of it is community goodwill. But those would all need to be sort of coalesced. So my goal in making any kind of decision would be really to get as much data as possible related to all these different choices, whether it's, again, language, use of technology. I don't think any decision would have to be one and none of the others. I think it might be just like the budgetary decision a few years ago, really may require investments, because these are really going to be investments in one or more of those categories. Turf field, I guess, that one is sort of either turf or you don't turf, but there's still types of So even there, within that sort of binary decision, there is a range of potential options and then funding options related. But fundamentally, the goal would be to get as much information as possible, again, from all the stakeholders, be open. And again, like in any company, I've been part of decisions where I've been, once a decision is made, so we'll talk about for a second about getting my way or not getting my way, as it were. But once the decision is made, you're part of a team, you have to be part of the team and move forward. So that's just part of any decision. And I would try to be as persuasive as I could for things. I would hope that my personal biases, stuff for my kids, would not overwhelm. But I think once the board makes, again, everyone is well-meaning. Everyone, is doing what's in the interest of the district. So I don't think I would think it very unlikely that someone would be making decisions that are purely not what they at least perceive to be best in the long-term interest of the district. But we should go for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Questions from board members? You want to start? Go ahead.
So, Stephen, in one of your answers, you talked about interacting with the community, and as long as the board is open and transparent, holds lots of meetings,
Right.
things are working well, and also.
I don't know. I'm not saying that work out well. That's optimistic. But
Okay.
that's the best you can do. Yeah.
And so that's part of my question, and also providing lots of information and data to sort of explain decisions. So we've had experiences where we've done that, and also experience where you cannot give all the information because it's confidential.
Oh, absolutely.
So I just wanted to get your thoughts and some more information about when you do have a situation where you are trying to be as open and transparent as you possibly can, and you can't give all the information, how do you go about persuading the community that you're doing the best way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we, on like the AY board, we have those circumstances come up. And even as a company, even as a public company, there's certain information you can divulge. So the general guideline is to be able to divulge as much as you can. And then you have to fundamentally, and this is sort of like a marketing thing to some degree, you have to have the community's buy-in, respect, and trust that you are acting and you're making decisions, even in the maybe absence of information or hidden information that you have, in the best interest of the community. And there are always going to be people who won't trust that. But fundamentally, I kind of know all of you, frankly. And I don't think that people fundamentally are not doing something that they perceive to be in the best interest, short-term and long-term, of the community. And so you have to sort of almost create that reputation. So there may be many times when you can be completely open and honest, and people can sort of vicariously follow the process and see that you're doing the right thing, or that your process is the right thing, even if the final steps of the decision, parts of the decision are not. And you build up that trust for the circumstances where, yes, in fact, absolutely there are circumstances where you can't give away everything. And if you build up that trust, and that through your openness and through your extra communication, then you'll have bought credits such that you can make decisions that sometimes may not be obvious, whether, there's a lot of part. I think that's the best you can ever do. There's no magic.
I want you, districts have limited resources, and there's these, making a choice as to how to apply those resources. One choice is to affect the most kids as most effectively as possible. But there are also special populations of kids, gifted, special needs. Can you take me through a decision-making process? How should the board think of allocating resources among special populations?
Sure. Well, initially there's also, at least for the special needs side, there are some laws that govern minimum programs and so on. So certainly it would never violate anything that's legally obligated on the board to do. So that's sort of your floor. And I don't know if that also applies at the gifted level. I think that there's more options there. I think that applies whether the programs, but you could really almost say that anything but the base curriculum can apply. Do we have money into recreation? Do we have money for sports teams? Do we have money just different interested parties in the general decision making. And so I think, given sort of that we want to keep an excelling school district, I think we need to have that blend of programs. So things like art and language and music and money to rec department. The rec can mostly be self-paying for it, to the best of my understanding, but some of those other programs maybe not. So I think that we do need to make sure more resources to them. How much we vote specifically really depends, as we get nitty-gritty on sort of what you can get. So how many full-time employees do you need to manage those programs? What kind of commitment for resources for classrooms do you need for those kind of programs? I think it's incumbent on us to provide as diverse and interesting education. Some of the things I talked about emotionally, goals, really, you can learn not necessarily through the classroom. There are kids who are not great in the classroom, but might excel on a sport team. They might excel in music, or in dance, or through drama, or through one of the art programs. So those programs have a lot of value in providing the kind, not just sort of easy school, as it were, variety, but provide the ability for kids to gain those emotional strengths. So I think, in terms of specifics of the program, I can't say, it needs to be 15% or 22% or X percent, because I don't know, I wouldn't be able to come up with the numbers without looking at it. But I think all those kind of programs add to the enrichment of our academic life. I know just specifically my kids in Crocker, one of them took the yoga class, and she loved it. That was one of her favorite things, and as hard as the school day was, she had that at the end of the day, and she looked forward to that, and it actually helped her a lot. And I don't know how expensive it was. It's one class, it's an elective, but my son also looked forward to cooking, but that's because he got an extra snack the other day. Helping the grand scheme of things. But so those are all sort of, I think the diversity of electives is what makes Crocker interesting in having those kind of things, as well as programs that are both targeted at those who are gifted, because I think there's I want to do that in my elementary school and middle school, and special needs as well. So I'm not sure I exactly answered your question. I was kind of vague and rambling a little bit. I'm sorry. But
Hi. In the interest of fair play, I need to ask you this question.
Yeah.
You've run for board
Twice,
I think, and to put it this way, you haven't been successful, you haven't been approved by the electorate, and
I don't know.
should there be a concern, I said that the wrong way,
I know.
how would you respond to someone if they said there's a concern that then you're asking this board to appoint you to this office because you've run on record a couple of times, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would almost say it differently. I would say that I wasn't very far off. I always finished one slot out of the next support slot, as it were. But what I would say is I received very high, a good percentage of the community who did support me and asked me to run. So I would almost say that there is at least a certain percentage of the district who are familiar with me and knew me enough to at least give me their vote at the time. And I was, again, not to sound excuse, but I was running against incumbents or people with more experience, but I still achieved a number of easy votes. So I would look at it that way, that I at least have the support of somebody.
Hi. So I have a question related to a comment that you made about a decision that we made, and you referenced the budget cuts,
Right.
and then Don was talking a little about resources. And
Sure.
I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about what you know about the current state funding climate, and in particular our current district funding climate.
So I don't know the latest as of this year. I know that some of the numbers are going to come out. I think they either just came out or will be coming out soon. I know this is about the time that we find out the numbers for how much the state will be giving us and so on. My understanding is that they are improved over the challenges we had a year and 2 years ago. But I can't give you specifics like X million dollars versus $5 million. I know that they're better. We're not rolling in surplus.
Thank you. Do you have any comments for us?
No, I mean, I think most of you guys sort of already know me, know most of the other candidates, I've seen them pretty well, given that
like a motion?